Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new malicious compliance content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, Involve the Police, Pay $1,000 Fine. So the day after Christmas about 10 years ago, my brother called me up and asked me for some assistance setting up some of his new computer equipment. He lived down the road from a store that specialized in discount china, so naturally it was extremely busy. Busy as in, cars were parked everywhere, including on the grass in front of the store, and it was impossible to see around the corner if someone wanted to pull out of the furthest exit. Unfortunately, the speed limit, 50 mph, is also extremely high on the road as well, even if you have to really try to accelerate to get to 50 mph by the time you pass the store. So I decided to play it safe and was doing roughly half the speed limit, perhaps 30 mph, while going around the corner of this store. Even at this speed, of course, some guy decided to pull out without checking, and I couldn't stop in time to avoid hitting him. Now, I was driving an older Mitsubishi that already had some damage, and he had a small dent in his fender. And come on, it's still Christmas, right? So I get out of the car, take a look at the damage, and turn around to see a furious, older, red-faced gentleman in front of me. Right after I tell him that it doesn't really look like much damage, so there's no need to contact the police, he proceeds to scream in my face about how I was speeding and this is all my fault. Oh no, honey. A young woman driving by herself may appear to be easily intimidated, but I was trying to be nice. If you want the police involved, let's do it, buddy. I called a non-emergency line, explained there was a very minor car accident, and that the other driver was insisting that it was my fault, so I would feel better if the police were involved. The dispatcher got my information, stopped for a moment, and then quietly thanked me for calling the appropriate number. 911 was hardly necessary, and told me that she also felt it would be safer for me if the police were dispatched. After a 30-minute wait, an officer showed up to the scene. I, not being a total moron, sat quietly in my car and waited for him to come over to me. The other driver felt it was necessary to leap out of his vehicle and run over to the officer and start screaming and gesturing wildly. I didn't catch what was said, but I did see the look on the cop's face, and I was getting more and more amused. After being clearly told to get back into his car, the cop came over to me and asked me what happened. I told him what was going on, and that not only had I not deliberately sped up to go the speed limit, I had actually slowed down because of how busy the business was. He nodded and went back to measure the skid marks on the road, and confirmed he believed I was actually doing about 25 and complimented my thinking on safe driving in this specific situation. He then proceeded to write the other driver a ticket, and the other driver pulled out of the parking lot a second time with his window down, flipping me off. At this point, the cop came over to me, explained that he wrote it up as the other driver's fault for more than $1,000 due to the damage on his fender. He also stated that, "Darlin', I don't say this often, but I believe you should take that man's insurance company for every dime you can get. Thanks for insisting we call the police." Next one is titled, Don't Piss Off Your Farmer Neighbor, You May Have to Pay for It. So this didn't happen to me, but an attorney that I work with regularly as part of my job. He moved from a very high COL area to our rural community. Sold his $2 million house, paid off and inherited from his grandparents, and bought 50+ acres with a huge house in a bedroom community that has a lot of dairy farms. He always used to say how it was much better living up here, both in terms of the lifestyle and monetarily, as his urban $2 million house had property taxes in excess of $40,000/year. Now, in addition to the huge house, the property was mostly fields, 40-ish acres, and had a 10-acre or so large woodlot. After he moved into his new house, the attorney was approached by his neighbor, one of the area dairy farmers. The farmer told the attorney how he had a handshake agreement with the former owner of the attorney's home/property. The farmer would mow the fields for hay 2 to 3 times per year and would harvest a sustainable amount of trees out of the woodlot. In exchange, the former property owner got 10% of the chopped wood, which was more than enough to heat the house all year long without having to run the oil boiler for anything more than hot water. The farmer wanted to keep this arrangement going as it had worked out well for both parties for over a decade. The attorney thought the former owner was being taken advantage of and refused to do a handshake agreement, but told the farmer to give him a week to draw up a proper contract. The farmer was not overjoyed with making this out to be more than a gentleman's agreement, but agreed to come back the following week. The attorney decided that what would be fair was that the farmer should pay him $1,000 each time he mowed the fields for hay, since the farmer would feed the hay to his cows for free otherwise, completely ignoring that the farmer was using his own equipment and time to do the haying, and that the lawyer deserved 50% of the chopped wood, not 10%, or at least the 50% of the revenue the farmer got from selling the excess chopped wood, again ignoring the equipment and time investment of the farmer. As you can guess, the farmer refused. This all happened in late 2019, when the fields were rather bare and the supply of chopped wood for the house was full. Well, here comes 2020, and now the fields start looking like garbage, because none of the other farmers will pay to hay the fields. In fact, after speaking with the first farmer, all of the other area farmers are unwilling to mow the fields unless the attorney pays them $1,000 per mowing. And, of course, come wintertime, the attorney's woodpile is depleted and he has to use the oil boiler to heat his entire home, costing well over $300/month in winter heating costs. Now we come to early 2021, tax prep season. The farmer, being a good and dutiful community-minded citizen, informs the town that he did not cultivate any of the attorney's land for the entirety of 2020, nor did he know of any other farmers who did. Well, as it turns out, this is a big deal, because in our state farmland is assessed at a much lower value than residential property, and additionally has a separate and lower tax rate. The attorney's land had previously been entirely zoned as farmland, except for the house and a few acres of lawn around it. Now, the town sent out an assessor and rezoned the entire 50-plus acres as residential, which more than tripled the taxable property value and imposed the residential tax rate rather than the much lower farm tax rate. The attorney was quite surprised and furiously told me, and everyone else we work with, all this past week, how he's going to sue the town because they now expect him to pay $50,000/year in property taxes. Last one is titled, "Customer thought we were moving her stuff too slow and wasting her time, so we hurried up." So I work as a mover for a very small moving company. My boss, let's call him Mike, is a really nice guy. It's really just a two-man operation, with me working as a subcontractor under him with a few regular guys we call in for bigger moves. It's really physically demanding work sometimes, but typically our customers are super nice and the pay is pretty good. Most people are just happy to have someone else to lift their heavy stuff and get it into a truck. And we're always super careful to not cause any damage to the buildings we're moving in and out of or the items we're moving, which most people appreciate. Not this lady. Let's call her Darcy. Darcy booked a move with Mike and told him she had a small storage unit she wanted us to load up into a 20-foot truck. We said, no problem. As the date of her move approached, though, so did a huge snowstorm. Days before her move, the news started reporting that the weather was expected to take a severe turn for the worst. Not uncommon for the time of year in our state, but also something not to be trifled with. We called Darcy a couple days before the move to see about rescheduling to avoid the storm, and she said she absolutely had to move that day. No other days would work. A lot of probably much smarter movers would have canceled, but after talking, Mike and I thought it was no big deal. We move in the snow all the time. Just meant we would have to dress appropriately and be extra careful not to injure ourselves or damage any property. Cut to the day of the move. We get to Darcy's storage unit, expecting a 10x10x15 standard storage unit full of your usual stuff, based on what she'd indicated on the phone, and load it into a 20-foot truck. That's a pretty easy job to get done in the 2 hours that she already prepaid for. As we pull up, the snow was already coming down pretty heavily, and the first thing that made us nervous was the truck. Instead of a 20-foot truck, there was a huge 26-foot truck. Darcy greeted us by the truck and showed us the storage unit. Darcy: okay, so this is our unit. We shut down our businesses and I'm moving it out of town to pursue other opportunities, and I need all of this loaded up in 2 hours. The last movers, I had got it unloaded in about that long. Mike said it's something about the truck being bigger than she told us. Darcy: yeah, it's the biggest one U-Haul had. Last time we used another company and it was much bigger. I'm worried about getting it all, but you guys will have to figure it out. I need all of it. This was a huge storage unit, like the kind you'd store a few cars or some farm equipment in. When we opened it up, it was filled with what appeared to be the contents of a couple of pretty decently sized businesses. A dozen of those huge floor-to-ceiling filling cabinets, several desks, office chairs, some really huge glass tables, and all of it was incredibly heavy. Now, our company's safety guidelines for weight limits are 100 pounds per person lifting an item, but there's no real practical way to enforce that in the field, so we usually wind up using our best judgment, even if the item is over that limit. Nearly everything there was over limit, but we had our equipment, and we were pretty confident we could handle everything, weight-wise. Mike and I are both pretty strong, but in my estimation, this was definitely going to take a bit longer than 2 hours. Mike told her that we would do our absolute best. To be fair, he should have leveled with her then and there that it would take a bit more time, but he probably wanted to see if we could just get it busted out as quick as possible and see where we were at before getting the customer needlessly worried. Darcy sat in her truck nearly the whole time we were working, so she could stay warm. Perfectly understandable since it was -2 outside and the snow was coming down pretty hard. Though she'd occasionally roll down her window to offer up critiques, mostly about how much time we were taking going up and down the metal ramp of the truck, which was now covered in ice and snow. About an hour and some change into the move, Darcy gets out of her truck and starts chatting with Mike about her previous movers and how they did cause some damage to her stuff, but they were so fast. It was weird. She went back and forth between complaining about them and praising them for their speed, and she kept referring to them as the professional moving service I hired, which really bugged me, because the way she said it seemed to be implying that because we aren't a big national company like Mayflower, then somehow Mike and I weren't professional movers, despite the fact that this is literally our full-time jobs. Now we're far enough into this move that we could tell this was going to run long. Mike decides it's a good idea to let her know that it's probably going to take a half hour or so longer than expected, which was still a feat, considering how much there was to move and how well packed this truck was. I pride myself on playing a mean game of truck Tetris. Darcy was not having this. She started to get upset and started saying how we were just trying to get more money out of her, and we were dilly-dallying. Yes, those words actually left the mouth of a grown woman. Then she starts in on how the professional movers got this same stuff unloaded in 2 hours. It should take the same time to load it. Mike explains to her that unloading always takes less time than loading, because you're moving it into a bigger space and you don't have to pack and pad the stuff to fit into a truck. I also mentioned that there's literally a blizzard coming down, and we're only going to go a little over. She gets quiet and seething. Mike can tell how angry she is and lets her know we won't charge her for any extra time since it's not her fault the weather is crappy. He also brings up that they damaged her stuff and we've done a pretty good job. Darcy, I don't care. You said 2 hours. I expect IT done. Just get IT done. I'm going to leave you guys a terrible review. She stomps back to her truck without saying a word. I'm usually pretty chill, but I was already getting increasingly mad at this woman. Her yelling at my boss and calling us lazy when we were risking our health and safety to move her stuff in a blizzard was just too much for me. Mike thinks about this for a moment. I know customer reviews are super important to us as a small business. The booking site we use highlights the last handful of reviews, so a bad one takes forever to stop showing up as basically the first thing people see when they click on your page. Cue malicious compliance. She wanted it all loaded in 2 hours. That's exactly what we do. The front half of her truck was loaded up neatly, with everything padded and stacked tightly floor to ceiling to keep it from moving on the road. I pride myself on my ability to load a truck properly and safely without wasting any space. The second half of her truck was the worst, jankiest truck I've ever loaded in my life. We're talking huge heavy office furniture, haphazardly stacked on top of each other at the weirdest angles. Heavy stuff on top of light stuff, anything to just get the storage unit empty and the truck door closed. We even stacked really heavy office chairs on top of glass tabletops. By the end of it, the truck looked like you'd asked Escher or Giger to draw you a picture of an office. I just want to be clear. We've never intentionally damaged a customer's property, and we never would. We pride ourselves on our professionalism, courtesy, and specifically our ability to get your stuff where it's going safely. But the particular combination of unsafe conditions and this lady's outright disregard for our safety and feelings was just too much. And technically, we didn't damage anything. Nothing was broken when we closed the truck doors. But literally the first bump in the road or decently tight turn was definitely going to cause hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars in damage. We closed the truck door and walked over to Darcy's truck and let her know. Mike went to her truck. He told her that we were done and that he wasn't going to charge her at all for the move. She insisted that she's not poor and doesn't need charity, and Mike just said that it was clear that she wasn't happy, and that he didn't need her $150. That's right, we charged $75 per hour, so the extra half hour we needed to do it right would have cost her a whopping $37. He canceled the job and refunded her what she'd already prepaid. As we drove away in Mike's car, I looked at him. Me, you realize that by the time she gets where she's going, she's looking at a lot of damaged furniture, right? She's going to hit us with a bad review and maybe even try to sue. Mike, she was worried about paying an extra $37. I doubt she'll risk more money on hiring a lawyer, and besides, you can't leave a review on the site if the job gets canceled. We just gave her exactly what she wanted, and besides, it's worth losing out on the money I would have made just to see her face when I said I didn't need her $150. When he dropped me off, he still paid me for my time because duck that lady. My boss, Mike, is a really nice guy. Thanks for listening.